Obviously, I have started more projects in my shop than I have finished. I'm not going to deny that. Why would I? The evidence is right here. My table saw still has no extension on the right side and a temporary solution for an outfeed table. So this setup isn't what I really want it to be, but it's been very usable. And I'm still making good progress, I think, on getting it all set up nicely. In fact, I've got some exciting news on this Unisaw makeover that I want to share. Over here on the other side of my shop, here's the latest accessory for my Unisaw that I picked up this past weekend. This is a 30-year-old MiniMax SC3. It's a European-style sliding table saw. Currently, the saw is mostly disassembled. I had to take it apart in order to transport it. The actual sliding table part is this big long thing that's back over on the other side of the shop. I'll show you that in a minute. But this is just the main unit here. And then over on this side is a whole bunch of other parts. There's what I think is called the outrigger, which attaches to the sliding table. And then there's this support thing over here that holds the outrigger up. Over here in the back, there's this long aluminum extrusion, which is the fence that goes in the other direction. So these Euro sliders have two fences, one for ripping and one for cross-cutting, and I'm still figuring all that out. Just in case there's any confusion, I want to go ahead and clarify what I mean when I say that this is a continuation of my Unisaw makeover. Some folks might look at this and ask, hey, Eric, are you replacing your cabinet saw with a slider? Or are you going to keep both? I mean, and if you're going to keep both, why didn't you finish the Unisaw makeover before you took on another thing? And that's a fair question, which is why I want to clarify. See, my plan is that I'm going to integrate these two table saws into one station. I haven't got it exactly figured out yet, but kind of, each saw would be the other saw's outfeed table. So really, this is not yet another example of me taking on a new project before I finish the last one. This is a very natural extension of what I was already doing. You might just see this as another accessory for my Unisaw. This saw was made in Italy, but it actually came with a Biesemeyer fence made in the US. Here's another example of this saw's unusual heritage. This made in Italy table saw actually has a Baldor motor in it. It's a 3 horsepower single phase. I said it was 30 years old. That's actually just a guess. I don't know when this was made. I mean, one of the things I was planning to do anyway was to build a crosscut sled. I just bought a sled that happens to have another blade and motor. So this thing has a 5/8 inch arbor, so it'll use the same kind of blades that I've already got, but it also has a scoring blade, which is interesting. I've never used one of those before. I haven't tested it yet. I haven't even turned it on or plugged it in, but I think that's an actual riving knife. I mean, the MiniMax, it has the same arbor, the same fence system. It's basically like I got my Unisaw a sibling. Here's something I think is weird. In the base of the saw, I'm pretty sure that's a big hunk of concrete bolted to the frame. Here's the power switch. I don't think this is original. Somebody wired this up later and put in what looks like kind of a regular old light switch. It's weird. So I'm sure we all agree here that I do not have a problem with constantly changing my mind or starting new things without finishing the last ones. This is just the natural next step. Here's the part of the table that actually slides. It's this big long piece of cast iron or formed steel or whatever it is. It's actually in pretty decent shape, I think, for its age, but I do need to do some cleanup work on it. In the manual, SCM calls this the Wagon. I'm so glad the saw came with an actual original set of manuals. There's one book for operation and maintenance issues and another one for parts with exploited diagrams. Every page of this manual is in 5 languages. one column for each language. One of the reasons that I believe this thing is about 30 years old is because what I've heard is around 1998, MiniMax changed the design of the SC3 and they started making the Wagon out of aluminum with a T-slot down the middle. This one has no T-slot, which actually is a little bit of an annoyance because that T-slot apparently comes in very handy. But when I browsed the online listings for this saw and ones like it, the older models with this kind of table are considerably less expensive. And so this is the way I wanted to get started with my experience with Euro sliders. So this is what the underside of the Wagon looks like. These are the ways that it rides on. Down the middle, there's this very heavy-duty bar. And then the rest of the ways are a metal surface on each side. The surfaces on the side are going to ride on bearings, and then there's a pair of bearings that this bar rides between. Here's what one of those bearings for the center looks like. It's got a concave surface that goes up against the round part of this bar, and there's going to be one on each side like this. When everything is adjusted, the bar fits fairly snugly between this pair of bearings. I haven't started the cleanup of the ways down here yet, but it doesn't look too bad. I actually have started the cleanup of these bearings though. This one looks a lot better than it did when I started, but how it looks isn't going to matter much because some of these bearings just won't spin very well, and this is one of them. It's pretty well stuck. When I realized that cleaning up these bearings wasn't making them work any better, I started to despair a little bit because I'm dealing with a machine that is around 3 decades old, made on another continent. I began to assume that it was going to be very hard to find replacement parts, so I started to look a little more closely. One of the first things I noticed is this snap ring. I didn't know what was in here. I was thinking of this bearing as one unit, but when the bearing isn't working, the snap ring just begs to be taken off. So I took one of these bearings apart, and this is what the individual pieces look like. There's this concave thing that contains what seem to be 2 little bearings held in place by a snap ring. So I considered myself very fortunate when I took some measurements and discovered that these bearings are a very common size. In fact, they're the size that people use for skateboards. In other contexts, people refer to them as a size 608 bearing. It's 22 millimeters on the outside diameter, 8 millimeters on the inside diameter, 7 millimeters thick. And in fact, the manual that I got with my saw, the first 3 digits of the SCM part number are 608. Apparently people use these bearings for all kinds of situations, but they're so widely used by skateboarders that they're often just referred to as skateboard bearings. So I found a store in my town that sells skateboards and supplies, and I bought myself a box of skateboard bearings after carefully reassuring them that I am obviously not cool enough to be a skateboarder. But these things seem to be exactly the right size, and I even got a sticker that I can put on the outside of my saw cabinet.